You are tuned in to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Lance White. Tonight, we're going to step way outside the box with my guest, NANCY DEVILLE. NANCY is an author and women's rights advocate who has led a very unconventional life. After graduating high school in Japan, where she lived as a Navy brat, NANCY hitchhiked across India and worked and traveled in Spain and Switzerland. She spent 15 years as a successful fashion designer. Then she wrote and co-authored influential books on food and health. Her new novel, Karma, is based upon her 2 decades of research into the global sex trade. It's a tough topic, but Karma is a story of courage, hope, and spirituality. To learn more, visit her public website at www.nancydeville.com, and we'll repeat that again at the end of the show. So let's welcome NANCY to the show now and find out more. Hi, NANCY. How are you?
I'm great, Lance. How are you?
I'm good. You know, when I try to read every author's book that's sent to me because, you know, that's just the way it is. If you want to do a good job, you want to read their works. And I just want to tell everybody that when I started your book, it was so disturbing in the beginning that I had to put it down, and I thought, I'm not sure that I can read this. And then I thought, now listen, Lance, you've lived through things much worse than this. Mm-hmm. You're going to, go ahead and read it and see what happens, because I felt like it was catching me. Well, a few sentences later, I was hooked. And I'm telling you, this book is a mind-blower. It is beautifully written. It's one of the best novels of any subject that I've read in a long time. And the descriptions and the characters just pop out at you. And you kind of forget, to some extent, the horrors that are going on, but you live them. You go through everything that the main character goes through, and it's an eye-opening book, and it's an important book. So I just want to tell you that everybody should just go out and buy it and read it and find out, because it really is loosely, thinly veiled fiction, isn't it, NANCY?
Yes, it's really just one story of the millions of stories that are happening to women and children across the globe today. And I made my protagonist American just simply because I wanted people to really have, no cultural barrier between what's happening. Mm-hmm. And, I wanted people to really feel it. Mm-hmm. And apparently I did a good job, because I'm getting a lot of comments like yours. And it is really disturbing, but I think we really need to know about this.
Well, yes, and that's kind of part of the process of healing our shadow. For so many thousands of years, we've pretty much stuffed all our dirty laundry down, and it has to come up somehow. And so what we find is it erupts in strange and bizarre ways. Jeffrey Dahmer and people like that. Mm-hmm. But a healthy person is able to look at these situations and see themselves in them, and then figure out what can be done. Because this does go on quite a bit, doesn't it?
Well, the estimates are 2 to 4 million women and children across the globe. That's a lot of people. And, of course, those numbers are always changing because, people die and new sex slaves are recruited. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult to say exactly how many people are affected, but it's millions.
Oh, yeah. Out of curiosity, what inspired you to write the book on the topic of sexual slavery?
You know, Lance, nothing really. I mean, I really didn't know what I was getting into, honestly. I just, like you said, I had a long career in the film industry and design, and I decided that I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to change careers. And I thought, well, I need a topic. And I had been a hippie hitchhiker in 1968 and 69. I traveled overland from Europe to India, and all of the hippies stopped at a restaurant called the Pudding Shop in Istanbul. Have you been there?
No, it was fascinating because I was a hippie too, but I never made it that far.
So it was really called Lael's Restaurant, but everybody called it the Pudding Shop, and it was where you went to, find out how much baksheesh you had to pay to get whatever you needed, and just hang out and be cool. And everybody went there on their way to India and Kathmandu and on the way back. And so while I was there eating my pudding, I met a girl who told me that I should be careful for white slavers. And I thought, wow. And of course I wasn't, because I was 18 years old and I was extremely babyish, 18 years old. But years later, when I wanted to change careers and be a novelist, I thought that would be a great subject. So I really didn't know what I was getting myself into, honestly. And
so
it was only after I got into it that I realized how profound it was.
It's going on in just about every country, isn't it? Including the United States. Yes,
including the United States.
Yes. I've even heard rumors on the internet that it's quite a big business, that the mafia is involved and some governments are involved, and politicians and wealthy people, and it's quite a lucrative operation.
Well, if you just take a rough estimate, let's call it 2.5 million women and children who are forced to service 20 customers a day, that's 50 million transactions every single day times 365 days a year. So that's a lot of money, no matter what country you're in. And so it is organized crime, but it's also thugs. It's just your basic common criminal, because why should they traffic in drugs and risk incarceration and be dodging bullets and endangering their own lives when they can traffic in women and children without any risk to themselves? So, and then women and children are much easier to transport across borders, much safer for the sex slavers, and there's an endless supply of replacements. They can be sold over and over again, whereas if you sell a drug, you sell it one time, right?
Right.
And so, and then they're easy to dispose of when they're no longer of value. So, now sex trafficking is the third largest criminal industry under drugs and gun running. But it's closing in. And so now, finally, it's getting a little bit of attention. And so when I hear that people say, I don't want to read it, I don't want to know about it, my feeling, because I've read so much about it, is you have to, because it makes you uncomfortable, you need to look at it. Because it's happening to people right now. While we're sitting here in our comfortable environments, somebody is being subjected to systematic rape, forced drug addiction, and torture.
Yes. Now, you show an example of how the main character, Dr. Meredith Fitzgerald, was taken, and it was, just kind of an innocent little side trip down at one of the bazaars, and the taxi driver was helping her, and she drank something and then she was asleep. Can you give us a little teaser of what happened to her when she woke up?
Well, what happens to all the women is exactly the same. It's the process of seasoning. And so it's rape, forced drug addiction, isolation, torture. They do what they have to do to break people's will so that they're too afraid to run away or to say anything. And, you know, I have people all the time when I do my book talks who come up to me and they tell me stories. And one woman told me that she goes to Dubai a lot for business and that she sees girls all the time. Everybody knows why they're huddling in the airport. Everybody knows who they are, what's happening to them. And it's just the way it is.
Yes.
So these girls are too afraid they can be in a public place, but they're not going to try to run away. And so that's why, you know, one of the things that I would like to bring to light in our country, you know, let's say you're driving down the street and you see a girl, you know, in spike heels and a mini skirt and a lot of makeup, and she's leaning into a car, and, you know, even though it doesn't give you a warm and fuzzy feeling, the fact is she's not there because she wants to be there. It's exactly the same thing. So the more that I've learned about sex trafficking, the more I realize that there really isn't a line between what we call prostitution or hooking or whatever and sex slavery. It's the same.
Yep. Now, one of the things that's so disturbing about these other countries is that these countries are so old, and they, you know, we're accustomed to a certain kind of refined form of this in our own cities. You know, we can easily say, oh, they're just the pretty girls on the corner. But these girls can be taken anywhere, and they're, you know, from teenagers or younger to the beautiful, you know, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, although I'm guessing they probably don't take girls usually that are older. But they're all beautiful girls, and then there's a process of hurting and breaking them down, which I thought was really interesting, that it's pretty consistent that one girl will resist more than the others, and so they always have a method to get the rest in line by pouring various, you know, liquids into their eyes and ears and nose, and they just literally dissolve. And so the poor girl's laying there with, you know, no face practically. And so the other girls, for having resisted so strongly, and the other girls are just terrified, and they've all been beaten and raped and, you know, have injuries and the rest of it. And then they fall into line, and somebody cleans them up and gets them ready for sale. And by that time, they're not even thinking about escape.
No, they're too afraid. They're too afraid, and they're deeply traumatized. And
oh yes.
And then if you imagine what it would be like for a child to be sold by his or her parents.
Oh yes.
And then to be systematically raped and to grow up, to go through adolescence that way.
Yeah.
So it's you know, it's been going on for a long time. This is nothing new. The only new thing is that now people are starting to become aware of it, and people are starting to crusade a little bit. But there's so much money that's necessary, because once the kids or the young women are rescued, they have to be rehabilitated, and that takes a long time and a lot of patience, a lot of love and compassion, and you know, they have to be repatriated back to their homes, and